Hello, everyone. We're full abilities. My name is Ola, and today I'm here with another member of our project, Hanya, and
Hi.
our special guest, Angela. Welcome to our, I wanted to say podcast, but it's not a podcast. Welcome to the interview.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, so let's start right away. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your chronic illnesses?
Sure. So my name is Angela. I live in the United States. I'm 34 years old, and so currently I have a few chronic illnesses. So I have been diagnosed with dysautonomia in the form of POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, mast cell activation syndrome, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, gastroparesis, chronic fatigue syndrome, and small fiber neuropathy. So I do have a bit of a list of conditions. And, while all of these topics would probably take hours to go through, I can give a little bit of a high level on what those are, if that would be helpful.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, perfect. So, dysautonomia in the form of POTS is an autonomic nervous system disorder. The autonomic nervous system controls basically everything that is supposed to be automatic that we don't really need to think about. So things like heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, sweating, temperature control, all of that stuff. So there are a really large amount of symptoms that come with dysautonomia and with POTS. So it impacts like every organ in your body, and it impacts all sorts of all sorts of systems. And then as far as mast cell activation syndrome, so that's a condition that causes your mast cells in your body to release an inappropriate amount of chemicals known as mast cell mediators. So this condition is really challenging because it just kind of comes up in so many different ways, and it can be really scary. You can have anaphylaxis, your throat can feel like it's closing. You might have to use an EpiPen. So mast cell has definitely been a little bit of an adjustment for me, and it's definitely been scary at times. And then hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So that's an inherited connective tissue disorder. So it impacts skin, joints, blood vessel walls. You'll hear people say that they have overly flexible joints as part of this. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome definitely causes a lot of different issues. It's for me, it's in my underlying for all of these. So that one has also been challenging. Gastroparesis is something that impacts your digestion. So generally with gastroparesis, you have muscular contractions that help move food through your digestive tract. And with gastroparesis, your motility slows down, and it slows everything down so that your stomach isn't emptying properly. So from there, that causes like a really downhill impact for the rest of your digestive tract. And then chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's a condition where you have extreme fatigue and it has lasted for at least 6 months, and it can't be fully explained by other underlying conditions. And, I think one of the toughest things for me about chronic fatigue syndrome is you never have sleep that's refreshing. You go to bed every night, and you wake up and you don't feel like you've even slept. So that can be challenging, of course, with all the other conditions that that I have as well. And then the last one I talked about was small fiber neuropathy. So basically that's a disorder where, your small sensory nerves are impacted. So generally, I think they've told me that it starts in your feet, and it generally progresses upward. So for me, it comes as like pain attacks in my hands where it's like burning and tingling. And, when I go to the neurologist each time, he does this test with a toothpick to see, how I'm doing and if it's progressing and if I can feel it. So it's been progressing a little bit for me. Like the last time I didn't feel the toothpick. So, that's also tough because that ends up impacting blood vessel walls, and all of these things really go together and impact each other. And you kind of almost feel like you're on a hamster wheel with all of these, because it's like you're trying to fix this for this one, but then this one pops up, or you're trying, then you try to fix that and then the other one gets worse. And it's definitely quite a challenge.
You have an Instagram page where you're doing an amazing job of talking about chronic illnesses. And so why did you decide to dedicate page like this specifically to chronic illness advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't really have a plan on this. I think when I got sick, I went through the medical system, and I think I started to realize that there was so much of a lack of awareness on these conditions, like whether it was paramedics when I was getting rushed to the hospital and ambulance, they had no clue. Get into the emergency room and doctors, nurses, everyone's confused. They don't know how to help me. And even with people I know, whether it's friends or family, they had never heard of this before. And I was like, oh my goodness, like we go through so much with these conditions, and it's I want to spread more awareness. But also, when I was in that kind of first phase of, things went really downhill for me in 2021. And when I said to myself, I remember I was in the back of the ambulance and I said to myself, when I feel a little bit better, like I need to start talking about this more, and I need to start to spread the word more so that, people know about this. And there's got to be other people that are suffering from this too. And is there opportunity for me to, relate to them or share with them? And, part of my journey, there were a couple of Instagram accounts that I followed early on that were really helpful for me. And they talked a lot about some of these comorbidities, and I was able to learn and, figure out, okay, I might have that. That sounds exactly like what's going on with my symptoms. I'm going to try to, go to this doctor to get this ruled out. And I feel like if I didn't follow those pages, I wouldn't be as far along with my diagnoses as I am right now. So, for me, it's like I wanted to be able to give back in that way. I was like, it's way too late for me to go to medical school at this point. So I can't, I can't do that. But, what else can I do without giving medical advice, but being supportive? So that's what, caused me to start my page. And, I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people. And even before the Thanksgiving holiday, there was a mom that reached out to me and was like, my daughter just got diagnosed and she follows your page and it's been so helpful. Thank you so much. Like we wouldn't have known about these conditions. And, that makes me feel really good to try to help someone get further along in their diagnosis.
I feel like it's also very inspiring to hear people's stories when they talk about it. So thank you for creating that page. It's amazing because I think we all want to spread awareness. Like here on this meeting, we all want to spread awareness, and that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing it. And I'm assuming you've met a lot of medical professionals in your life. Have you ever experienced gaslighting or mistreatment? Maybe you can tell us about your best and worst encounters with medical professionals.
Yeah, it's a tough topic because I, like so many others, have experienced so much gaslighting, more than one should ever experience in their life. And, what's hard for me too is some of my symptoms started. So I know I mentioned earlier that 2021 was like sharp downhill spiral for me, but I had been fighting stuff for quite some time, and I had been seeing doctors, and I saw a gastroenterologist who was like, it's your stomach. We'll give you something to just like calm it down, and there's nothing going on. It's fine, like no further testing. And that specifically, like just not diving into it and just trying to, give me something that they had no clue if it would work or not. That's tough. I had so worst experience, I would say I have two that are tied, that it's hard for me to pick one or the other. But one of them, my mom and my boyfriend were with me. I was hospitalized for about a week when all of this started, and I was in the cardiac ward, and they were trying to, they were monitoring my heart. The attending doctor really had no clue about these conditions, and he hadn't even come in to see me yet at this point. Like, I had been there for a day, I hadn't seen him. And then they sent in a psychology doctor instead of the attending first. And I was like, okay. And the psychology doctor was sitting there trying to basically talk me out of my symptoms. He was like, we want to put you on, a medication that will calm you down, and, it'll sedate you a little bit. And, a lot of this stuff is in your head. And, they brought up, and I'm in human resources too. So the doctor is like, you're a woman, there's hormones. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Excuse me? And he's like, there's a lot of stress in people's lives right now. There's a pandemic. So he's trying to talk me out of this. And I was just like, no, that's not what's going on here. Like, absolutely not. Like, I can't even like go from sitting down to standing up without my heart rate being at 200. Like, that's like not normal. So he was not successful with me. And I could see my mom just like fuming. And so then a couple hours later, they send in a second psych doctor. And this different doctor, he was trying to do a different approach. He was trying to talk me through this. And I was like, no, like, we're not, this isn't it. This is definitely not it. And the next day they sent in a third psych doctor. So that was probably my worst experience, and probably the worst gaslighting and dismissal of like what was going on. And then it came down to like, if I didn't agree to take the medication, they wouldn't release me from the hospital. So I was like, yeah, I'll agree. And then when I got home, I threw it out. I mean, I was just like, this isn't the path. Like, there's something wrong. And then my other tied worst experience was with my primary care doctor after that hospitalization. He went down the same path. And again, he was like, you're a woman, there's a lot of hormones. And I was just furious. I remember leaving that appointment with him too. And I was like, he's fired. Like, I'll be looking for a new primary care doctor. Like, this is awful. So those are my worst. Let me go over to my best. So my best experience was recently, and it's Dr. Lauren Zafran. I think, they say that he is world-renowned mast cell specialist, and I can attest that he truly, truly is. I went to go see him because I just was in such a difficult place with my mast cell. Like, I just couldn't, I couldn't even go a day without having a really bad reaction. And his office, they did such a thorough intake with all of my medical records ahead of time. And then we got there for Dr. Afrin's appointment. It was almost a 4.5 hour appointment. He goes through like your entire life. And, you know, I think he was able to connect so many dots for me that I wasn't even thinking about. And it wasn't just about mast cell either. He was able to connect so many other dots. And I left there. I have a 46-page guide from him that he wrote up himself. And basically it helps me identify, like, if I'm having a flare, if I'm having this issue, this is the medication to try. And I've had some great success recently with, you know, some of that trial, but the time that he took with us, the explanation, I had a follow-up visit with him a few weeks ago too, and same thing. I mean, he went over all my test results. He made sure I understood everything. And at no point did he try to dismiss like anything, which is amazing. So that's been our absolute best experience so far. So now I'm holding the rest of my providers to this experience.
I'm listening to you, and it's as if I was listening to myself talking in a way, and also so many other people that I've talked with, and we had also interviews with. So, and also you mentioned about the finding some of the clues that may lead you to your diagnosis on Instagram, and that was for me. But on Facebook, my mom found someone who suggested something, and it turned out to be the truth. And yeah, I have also met so many doctors, and also psych doctors. The only difference was that I was 11 and they told me it's because I'm growing up, or there's too much stress because of school. So, but
I'm so
you
sorry.
kind of already answered this question, but getting diagnosis takes time. It can take months, it can take years. So has it been very long for you?
So in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's been about 14 years. And if you asked me this question probably a year ago, I would say, oh, I got quickly diagnosed. But then when I started to meet with all my doctors and figure out, like, along my life where this all went wrong, now I know that, you know, so for example, in 2007, that's back when I was in college, and I played college basketball. And prior to, you know, me going to college to play basketball, I didn't do any long distance running, like, in my entire life. Like, I've never ran, you know, more than like a yard. So when I got to college, we had to do a 5-mile run. And I was like, uh-oh, like, I've never, but then I was like, well, I have to do it. And I had an episode after running that to this day still scares me. So I did the run. I felt terrible. I didn't have any sort of Fitbit, or, you know, we didn't have any smartwatches back then to tell me, like, what my heart rate was. But I guess I would assume it was high, but I remember feeling so much chest pain. I was really dizzy after. Where we were running was like right next to my apartment. So I remember, like, getting back to my apartment was really difficult. And I got back to my apartment, and then I just, like, passed out for 3 hours. And when I woke up, I didn't realize where I was. I was, like, trying to, like, connect the dots about where I was. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that scared the heck out of me back then. And I started a diagnostic journey after that. They put me through, they put me through so much testing back then. They had me do vocal cord therapy too as part of it back then. They had no idea. But then I had an episode on a plane to Hawaii. Again, didn't have a watch at that point in time, but I could feel my heart pounding. My chest was hurting. I sweat through my entire, like, all of my clothes, and my legs started to swell up. So when we landed in Hawaii, I was going there for a basketball thing, and our trainer was, like, looking at me, and he was like, oh, you'll be fine. It's just, you got, sometimes legs swell up on a plane, like, everything will be fine. But I was like, I don't know, like, something isn't right. So I continued to pursue testing back in 2007, and they at the end of it, they were like, oh, I think it's something called costochondritis, which is some inflammation in like the cartilage in your chest and in your ribs. And they were like, you know, you'll grow out of it, it'll be fine. So I remember thinking like, okay, I don't know. And you know, from there, it was just like gastrointestinal symptoms started to go downhill, and you know, things just weren't right. And I always knew things weren't right. And you know, I went to a functional medicine doctor. I tried supplements. Like I've tried so many things over the course of my life. And then in 2019, I saw a gastroenterologist. She dismissed me. You know, things just kept going downhill. And then in August of 2021, that's when things just went, you know, basically my body was like, you need to stop. And you know, I was rushed to the hospital. I want to say it was probably 10 ambulance rides in that kind of time frame, and emergency room visits and, you know, admissions. And you know, they just had no idea. So from the 2021, like real downhill spiral, I got diagnosed quick from that downhill spiral. But I would say 14 years before that, I had been trying, but unsuccessful.
Throughout all these years of the diagnosis process, how have you come to accept or at least tolerate your illnesses? And is there something you would like to say to people that are newly diagnosed?
Yeah, so I would say, like, I will say that I understand the diagnosis that I've been given at this point. I'm still pursuing some additional diagnoses over the next actually couple months. I definitely understand that there's no cure for these right now. So right now it's about managing symptoms until some major breakthrough happens. I would say I have a hard time accepting that this is the quality of life that, you know, I have right now. Like I want a better quality of life, and I'm trying to find out like what that is and what that looks like. So I think I'm still on that journey. And I guess I wouldn't call it full acceptance at the moment. But, you know, I think what I can say for those who are still early in their diagnosis or struggling, like, don't give up and don't accept that, you know, don't accept any sort of like dismissal of symptoms, or, you know, the quality of life that you want, and, you know, keep pushing, keep pursuing, find the right doctors. I can't stress that enough. Like I definitely have seen so many providers, but the biggest takeaway for me is, you know, finding providers that understand this and finding providers that specialize in this. Now, that's easier said than done. I mean, many clinics are 2 to 3 years out right now. And I know they're trying to work through their backlog, but even if you get on that wait list, or you at least get your foot in the door with some of these specialists, there's cancellations. But yeah, I think for me, it's like, don't give up, you know, keep pushing forward, even if it's, you know, it's a couple years out, like find the right doctors. And you know, I will say I've had improvement, right? From when I first went downhill in 2021, there's definitely been improvement. I'm not at the place where I want to be, but I've had improvement for sure.
How has your chronic illness affected your education or your career, if in any way?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, education, I had gastrointestinal symptoms in college, but I was able to navigate through that. It wasn't nearly where I'm at, you know, as bad as where I'm at today. So I would say, like, I got through my college education okay. As far as my career, so when I started having these symptoms, I was working for a technology company. I was in a really big role. I had multiple levels of responsibility, multiple direct reports. I had a lot of, basically my days were just constant. Like there was constant things that I had to get done or addressed or, and that became difficult for me. I had to, I kind of had to take a step back after my hospitalization and kind of say, like, what do I want to do going forward? And, what makes sense for me and my health. And I decided that I wanted to just focus on human resources. Like that is my passion. I had a whole bunch of other responsibilities too at my previous job, but so I started to look for a job that just focused on human resources, and that's where I am now. So this past June, actually, I went over to this new job, and it's been great to focus just on, one area, and that's been, I think, really helpful too in, my conditions and stuff like that.
Do you mind when people are curious or asking about your illnesses?
So I definitely fully appreciate anyone who wants to learn more about this because there's such a lack of awareness, and it's, it makes me feel validated when someone's asking about it and, genuinely wants to learn about what it's like on a day-to-day basis. I think what's tough is when you have people that don't do any research and then they send you something like meditation cures everything. And, I think I see you're both laughing. But, I, I, I'm a believer, right? I think meditation's great. But there's no scientific evidence that it cures any of my illnesses. So sometimes it's hard, like that unsolicited advice can sometimes get to you, I think, and you just want to send them like a research paper about POTS or, dysautonomia or, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and just have them read that and then be like, okay, can you get back to me after that? But, I definitely appreciate people wanting to learn more. My primary care doctor now is a great example of that. He's always looking to learn more. He wants to know like what I've learned from my specialist. He's always reading all my notes and keeping up to date. And he has many patients like me, actually. So he's trying to learn from all of us. And I think anybody that wants to learn about it and, anyone who asks me about it, I definitely appreciate that. It's a good feeling of validation.
I laughed so hard when you said about the meditation because I've gotten those kind of advices as well, and also yoga or some herbs, just everything. But is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered in this interview, but you think is important?
I don't think so. I think, the final thing I think I would say to everyone is, the chronic illness community is such an amazing community and everyone is there for each other. And, I highly recommend, following anyone that is a chronic illness advocate, anyone who is hosting any sort of chronic illness support group. The support groups are great. There's a lot of ideas that get bounced off of each other. I think it's been great to just see how everyone's there for each other and supporting each other. And, that makes me, happy that people are there for each other. And I definitely recommend for people to, kind of find their group, find people who are going through the same thing that they're going through. It's definitely really helpful.
Okay. We ran out of questions. So thank you so much for doing this interview. It has been amazing opportunity to listen to you talk about your experiences. Amazing. It always inspires me so much when I listen to people who have been through so much in their lives, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And thank you all for watching. we want to invite you to follow our Instagram, Facebook, and also check out Angela's page because it's amazing. And yeah, see you guys in the next videos. Bye.
Thank you so much.